Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to the fourth and final webinar in our 2016 series with David Ackert, Business Concepts for Business Lawyers, Understanding the Drivers Your Clients Care About. This series is brought to you by the International Lawyers Network, of which your firm is a valued member. The ILN is an association of 91 high-quality, full-service law firms with over 5,000 lawyers in 67 countries on 6 continents. Some housekeeping notes. To ask questions, please use the chat box on your screen, and I'll ask these of David. We'll be sharing the PDF of the presentation slides along with the recording following the session. Our presenter today and throughout the series is David Ackert. David is the president of the Ackert Advisory and mentor to high-achieving professionals in the legal profession. He has developed and implemented business development programs for countless firms from AmLaw 100s to local boutiques. Widely recognized as an e-learning pioneer in the legal field, David is the founder of Practice Boomers, a business development e-learning program and 2-time winner of the Legal Marketing Association's Your Honor Awards. He's also the founder of Practice Pipeline, a pipeline management software platform that incorporates business development coaching. The combination of technology and coaching has become a hallmark of his programs. So with that, I'll pass over the microphone to David for his presentation.
Thank you, Lindsay. Great to be back online with your ILN network. Today we're going to look into business concepts for business lawyers, understanding the drivers that your clients care about. We're going to be challenging some ideas today. Some of them may be things that you've been thinking about. Others may challenge established thinking. So hopefully you'll be able to keep an open mind today. The idea is to hopefully bring in some new perspectives to the client development process and give you a fresh way to approach it that might improve your ability to be a little bit more competitive in today's landscape. We're going to start with an overview of the new legal model. Most of you are certainly cognizant of this. You're living and breathing it, but I think it'll be useful for us to just take a step back and look at how we got here and what we need to do to move forward through it. Then we'll be looking at how the strategic planning process can help you anticipate business and legal needs. When I say the strategic planning process, I mean your client's strategic planning process. Most law firms are not all that aware of their client's strategic plans or the process they go through to arrive at those plans, but those strategic objectives drive the legal needs that they have, and so the more cognizant you are of them, the better you'll be able to position yourself as a trusted advisor. Then we'll look at navigating a business inquiry with your client and strengthening your value proposition, and finally aligning your pitch to your client's business needs now that you are armed with some of this new information and this new perspective. So most of you remember fondly the days of the old model. This was before the recession. It was a seller's market. Law firms were really driving the process. They would define their fees, and the clients would pretty much pay them without a lot of pushback. In many cases, the clients would be appealing to the law firms to take their cases, and the law firms could position as, well, you know, we're very busy. You're not exactly, you know, the biggest client. We have a lot of priorities to manage. We'll get back to you on this, and sometimes they would and sometimes they wouldn't. These were the days when it was a common complaint to say that their lawyer was not as responsive as they would like, and really what was going on with the lawyers were overwhelmed, but that there was so much on their plates that was attractive by way of billable work and opportunities that they didn't have to do a lot of prospecting, and they could be very choosy about who they worked with and the kind of work that they did. Law firm clients were relationship-driven, so if you had a relationship with your client or relationship with the law firm, you could pretty much guarantee that that was going to be a legacy client. You didn't have to do a lot except just provide good legal services and not screw up too badly, and the clients would stick with you. Very little pushback on fees, as I mentioned. We certainly see a different scenario today. Lawyers were strictly reactive to client problems. Now, this is less a factor of an era and more simply a principle to the profession. The practice of law is a reactive business model. You don't have anything to do until a client has a problem, and then you solve their problem. So until they call you with the problem, there isn't much that you can do to drive business, and that was certainly the thinking prior to 2008. Now law firms are getting a little more creative about looking at how they can be proactive as advisors to their clients and perhaps look for opportunities that the clients haven't yet spotted or haven't started thinking about or engaging the firm about, and yet the lawyer can get engaged in the conversation so that they're first in line when that issue becomes front and center for the client. This is part of the new thinking with the new model, and something that ultimately law firms and lawyers are going to need to get better and better at if they expect to capture more market share. In the old model, there was year-over-year double-digit growth for most law firms. Now most firms have single-digit growth. They're lucky if they have a double-digit year. Again, times have changed. So let's look at what motivated that change. I'm going to play you a quick video here. Hopefully this will play for you, and that will kind of set the stage for our conversation today. Okay, well, that is intended to be aspirational. Hopefully it didn't bum any of you out too much. The idea here is that times have changed. It's time for us to change with them. And there's no law firm that's really figured out how to do that. A lot of law firms are trying new things. Some law firms are developing products. Some law firms are doubling down on their AFA strategy or their project management strategy. Some law firms are doing all of these things. Some law firms are looking at how they can create lower cost options for their clients with new services that are essentially competing with the services that they used to provide themselves. But all of these approaches are viable in that they at least create a differentiator in the marketplace and give the law firm something that they can come to the table with so that they can hopefully gain some of the work that their competitors currently have. That's really the only way to grow in a flat landscape, is to take some work from somebody else. So there's this inherent conflict of interest between the firm and its client, which this new economy has really underscored. You know, if you think about it, the firm's agenda is to maximize fees, maximize firm profit. The client's agenda is to minimize the law firm's fees and, if possible, eliminate firm profit. This is why clients are pushing back on the stated rates, looking for something as close to a wholesale rate as they can possibly get, cutting the firm's profit down to virtually nothing. And of course, because it's such a competitive landscape, the clients now are able to take that very aggressive position. The firm wants to keep lawyers busy. That's the whole model, as the video just illustrated visually. The clients want to outsource as little as possible, and this is why we're seeing the rise of the in-house legal department as a replacement to outsourced legal. There are more and more in-house lawyers that are doing the work that used to be shepherded out to the firms, and that, of course, means less work for the firms. The firms are looking to secure the next matter. The client doesn't want to have a next matter. Now, this is not a goal that they're likely to accomplish, but if they are able to increase efficiency and populate their in-house department well enough, then they can certainly make sure that their next matter will cost them a lot less than it would have otherwise. And the firm wants to eliminate non-billable time, right? If we can bill all of our time, then our profit margin goes up. The client wants their lawyers to spend more non-billable time getting to know their businesses. And this is a complaint that we hear often from GCs, in-house counsel panels. They talk about, you know, the lawyers just don't understand the nuances of my industry and my business as much as we'd like them to. Now, times have changed a bit in the last few years. Law firms are responding to this feedback. They have gotten a lot better about creating industry groups and making sure that their lawyers have practices that are more niched around a particular sector, certainly around a particular area of expertise. And so clients are now able to find lawyers who specialize in the kinds of problems that they have. But even so, as I'll share with you in a moment, in-house counsel still feel that there is room for improvement, significant room for improvement when it comes to lawyers' awareness of the client's business. So let's gain a little bit of perspective here. I think it's very easy because we throw around these terms like, oh, high-stakes litigation and, you know, the legal matter that is going to really help this company thrive or perhaps make the difference between whether or not it survives. Law firms tend to have a bolstered sense of their importance in the business landscape and in the client's economy. But consider that, at least in the U.S., most law departments, they're only 0.25% to 0.75% of their company revenue goes toward the legal department. So if you look at the legal budget as a percentage of a company's revenue, it's very, very small. All the rest of the money is going toward things like research and development and paying salaries and marketing their products and making sure that their strategic relationships are well fed and making sure that they are planning for the next big thing, whatever that is, and developing and releasing that and making their own profit margin happen. These are the priorities that they really care about. Legal is almost a nuisance. It's the thing that can get in the way of everything else. So it's somewhat myopic to think that the legal matter that you're working on for your client is where the client's priorities begin and end. Now, it may be for the legal department, but again, that's thinking somewhat myopically because the legal department only commands 0.25 to 0.75% of the company's revenue. So in order for the lawyer to truly be strategic and understand the business from a broader perspective, he or she needs to have a better sense of where all of this other revenue is coming from, where it's going, and how those drivers are preceding the legal matters and causing the need for the legal matters that the law firm is going to work on. By the way, for all of these slides where I'm citing statistics, I've got the link on there. I'm sure Lindsay will be distributing this deck. If she hasn't already, I believe she's already sent it out. So you'll be able to check out the research that I've done here and make your own assumptions about it. So if we look at what clients want, the General Counsel Excellence Report last year survey sponsored by Teralex, which is a referral network of more than 150 firms in 100 countries, identified the following criteria that GC used for selecting outside counsel. The first thing they said, the most important thing is expertise. Now, of course, this not only means legal expertise, but it also means their expertise when it comes to our sector, our industry, our business. Secondly, of course, is price. We're well aware that that's a priority of theirs. And the third is responsiveness, which surprised me. I would think that at this point, we've really heard that message, and that, every lawyer is doing everything they can to make sure that they're being responsive to their clients. But this is still something that they feel they need to put on the top 3 as criteria. In other words, there are lawyers out there who simply are not responsive, and so they wouldn't make the top 3 criteria. Or at least not responsive enough. So I think it's an opportunity to have communications with your clients, make sure you understand what their expectations are when it comes to responsive. I think everybody defines that a little bit differently. Their expectations may even be unrealistic, in which case you may want to have a conversation about what it should look like moving forward. 43% of U.S. firms need to do a better job of understanding the business needs of general counsel. This is from this survey. So 43% of U.S. firms need to do a better job. That's a significant number. Consider that, given that this is sort of a read on the marketplace, that just under half of your clients may have this opinion of you, that you really need to do a better job of understanding their business needs. 53% of law firms are rarely in contact to see how satisfied the client is with the work. This is a U.S. statistic. Globally, the statistic is lower, but it's still significant. Again, it is somewhat closed-minded, I would assert, for any law firm to be looking at these statistics and say to themselves, yeah, but they're not talking about us. I mean, we're the exception to the rule, obviously. I'm sure 100% of our clients think that we do a fantastic job of understanding their business needs. And I'm sure 100% of our clients feel that, they're satisfied with our services and that we don't really need to be checking in about that. I mean, they'd let us know. They'd fire us, for God's sake, if they weren't all that happy with us. And they'd certainly give us some indication. But, again, the statistics are telling a different story here. So don't be two-dimensional about your thinking on this. You've got to get in dialogue with your clients and find out which of them, not whether, but which of them are harboring these kinds of opinions about your firm. Because those are the clients who are most at risk of being picked off by the competition. And then finally, on the bottom here, 60% routinely ask law firms for alternatives to traditional hourly billing. This is a rising statistic. It was only 47% in 2014. So if your clients are not demanding AFAs yet, just you wait. They will be. According to this statistic, over half of them are already looking for alternatives to traditional hourly billing. Now, that could mean that they're looking for flat fees. It could mean that they're looking for some sort of collar on the fees that you are going to be charging them on a given matter. We'll talk about some of the different AFA models in a moment, but this is something that is very much top of mind for in-house counsel currently. I'm going to focus on these 3 statistics because I think they are significant. 43% of U.S. firms need to do a better job of understanding the business needs of general counsel. So we're going to dive into each of these 3 at the bottom to provide some structure for the presentation moving forward here. So consider that the way that most corporations think and operate is very different from the way that law firms operate. To back up that comment, I will challenge you to consider the mission statement of your firm, or the vision statement of your firm, or perhaps even your firm's core values. Now, most law firms just don't go through that kind of a process when they're doing strategic planning. And even if they do, it's sort of one and done. Everybody felt good at the partner retreat, and they wrote something down, and it's parked somewhere on the server. But nobody's looked at it. They'd certainly never consider putting it up on their walls like these corporations do. Like in the cafeteria, the mission statement is stenciled on the wall for all to see, or the employees have the company values on a sticky note next to their monitor. I mean, this is very much driving the way that they think about what it is that they do every day when they come into the office. Lawyers don't really operate that way. Lawyers certainly have a keen awareness of the bottom end of the strategic planning process. In other words, their understanding of the client's goals and perhaps the tactics. They certainly understand the deadlines that are affiliated with that, as long as it is in a legal context and pertains directly to the matter that they're brought in to work on. They may have a marginal awareness of the company's strategy, at least the legal strategy, but most lawyers, I would assert, again, their awareness of the strategy is, well, they want to make this legal matter go away so that they can continue with business as usual. But they're not really sure what business as usual is. I mean, they can maybe speak to it in broad brushstrokes, but they certainly couldn't represent that company to a prospective strategic partner. And again, the lawyer has a valid pushback on this point. Look, that's not my job. I'm not their management consultant. I'm not their CEO. I'm their lawyer. I'm supposed to come in as a hired gun and handle whatever legal matter they put in front of me, and then make it go away and make sure that I get a good result for them. And then hopefully just wait by the phone until they call me for the next one, and I've demonstrated my value to them, and the phone will ring. And that's a completely valid position prior to 2008. The challenge here, and again, I warned you, we're going to challenge your thinking on this one, is that in a competitive, flat market like this one, you've got to start to think a little bit more creatively and aggressively about how you're going to position yourself with your client. Because the clients are looking for reasons to fire any firm who is charging more than they think they should. And given the statistics that I just shared with you, that's a lot of the clients in your book of business. So the question over here on the right is, can you offer effective strategic legal counsel if you have no awareness of the client's strategic plan? Now, some lawyers would argue yes, but again, I would say that thinking probably operates within this notion of, I'm here as a legal hired gun. I'm here to make the legal problem go away, solve that problem, get a good result, and then wait until there's another legal problem. And I would challenge that if you want to be a trusted advisor to your client, you need to increase your awareness of their strategic plan, of their vision, mission, and values, so that at the very least you can speak the language that they most care about, and that you can tie the strategy that you're going to bring to the table to the drivers that the business considers the soul of the company, its lifeblood, the things that are ultimately going to be priorities beyond the matter of the day. So I would ask you to think of your top, let's just say, top 2 or 3 clients, and challenge yourself as to whether or not you understand their priorities. So let's say that this is their list of priorities. The first priority is driving revenue. I'm fairly certain of that. Second priority, increasing market share. I've heard them talk about that. Third priority, probably new market penetration, increasing efficiency, managing risk. They certainly have some concern about competitors, and we've helped them to navigate some conflicts there. Workforce retention, we certainly know from the labor and employment work that we do for them that that's a priority for them. R&D and innovation, certainly we've filed some patents for them, and we know that they're constantly developing new products and services and initiatives. And then improve corporate culture. I'm sure that's important to them because it follows that workforce retention is important. They want to make sure that everybody at the company feels good and wants to stick around and feels good about the direction of the way things are going. But then I might challenge you on the order of it. Is driving revenue really their first priority? Maybe it looks a little more like this. Maybe the first priority is managing risk. Maybe this client is actually doing pretty well, and they're much more concerned about making sure that they don't lose market share rather than driving more revenue and increasing market share. Again, you don't want to make too many assumptions about this, because as a trusted advisor, this would be something that you would have an awareness of. You would know at least their top 3 or 4 or 5 business priorities. Again, not tied to the specific legal matter that you're working on, but knowing how that flows up into the business's priorities from an elevated perspective. Because those business drivers inform their legal priorities. The way that they push back on fees, the things that they're going to be more sensitive to than others, are going to absolutely tie into where they are placing priorities for the business. So if managing risk is their first priority as opposed to driving revenue, that's going to define a different approach to how they negotiate with you, the kinds of firms they're going to be looking for, and the kinds of competitive pitches they might be open to. But you have to be cognizant of where their key priorities are, because if you assume that, well, you know, on this list of 9, I'm sure they're all pretty important to the company, so we're just going to make that assumption, then you place yourself at a disadvantage when you're having more sophisticated conversations with them about why they should be using you as an outsourced resource to help them meet their objectives. So one of the ways that you can identify what their priorities are and perhaps rank those priorities is, this harkens back to Bill Flannery's materials. They're relevant today as they were when he first introduced them a few decades ago. Ask your client, what do you want your organization to look like in the next 3 to 5 years? You know, many lawyers don't ask that question. This helps to identify what their strategic planning process is, what new products, services, or major changes are you anticipating. Again, don't be in that reactive model where you find out about a new product because there was an issue with that product, or it turned out that that product has a competitor in the marketplace, and now that that's become a relevant legal matter, they're picking up the phone and calling you about it. The more you have a sense of the things that they are developing, the things they are thinking of, the more you can play that strategic role with them, give them perhaps some warnings about some things that they should be thinking about, bring in some CLE that is going to tie directly to a product development or a service development initiative that they're currently thinking about as part of their 3 to 5 year strategic plan. Question number 2, when and where do you plan to open new offices or plants? Again, this can identify cross-jurisdictional work for your firm. It can identify opportunities for you to use the ILN network to help another firm who you know through this network into some business for the client. It can help you to identify real estate law opportunities that you can begin to prepare for and begin to pitch for before they have come to you for that, so that you're already in dialogue with the client, and it's unlikely that they're going to then go to another firm for that because you already kind of understand the issues and you've already done a little preliminary research on this. I mean, it's almost like they've already started engaging you on this thing. Number 4, how do you see your competitive landscape changing? Again, don't just be concerned about the competitors that are currently showing up on the dockets that you're working on. You want to have a sense of the emerging competitors and what kinds of research or what kinds of issues you may want to help the client successfully accomplish, so that you're already in dialogue on these issues and it just becomes a natural course for the person in their in-house legal department who's delegated this particular issue when it starts to flare up to pick up the phone and call you because you've already been advising them on it. It's sort of like the employment lawyer model where you are an advisor to them, and you're not really billing that much for, you know, a little advice here, a little advice there, but what you're doing is becoming someone who understands their issues, understands some of the dynamics, the culture at the company, so that when there is litigation, of course, you're the first call that they make. They've developed this relationship with you, and you were there when you didn't necessarily have as much to gain. So it's a little bit of deferred self-interest as part of your business development strategy. Number 5, can you walk me through the critical parts of your organization chart and talk about the legal and purchasing decision-making process? You know, you would be surprised. There are people within the legal departments of your clients who are empowered to hire outside counsel who may not necessarily have a C-suite title. They may not be the deputy GC or the GC or a C anything. But because they are working on a particular matter, the GC says, you know what, just hire whoever you want on this thing, but let's just get it taken care of. So you want to make sure that you're networking within the org chart of the legal department, and hopefully starting to make inroads into the C-suite beyond the legal department. Again, we've covered in prior webinars for ILN how vulnerable you can be if you pride yourself on having a strong relationship with the GC, but then the GC jumps to another company or is fired or whatever it might be, and suddenly you find that your legacy relationship is no longer a foothold in the organization. What do you see as the role of outside counsel? I think it's important to ask that question. Get to understand the attitudes of your clients when it comes to the law firms that they engage. And by the way, there are some of you on this call who are working with institutional clients and that your clients have legal departments. Others of you may be working more in the small to middle market, and your clients are the individual business owners, or they are entrepreneurs, or perhaps you're working with private equity funds or what have you. But I think you'll find this question to be useful regardless. What do you see the role of a law firm as it pertains to the growth of your business? You may find that they have expectations that you simply have not been fulfilling. You've been assuming that, well, your role is to just be available when they have a legal issue, when in fact they were hoping that you would help make some introductions to new sources of capital or to other advisors, or to include them on some of the CLE that they see on your website but that they never seem to get an invitation to. So again, this is the kind of communication line that you want to keep open with any client that you hope to keep long term. Number 7, what has been your experience with value billing methods, and who gets involved in determining ROI? You want to have a sense of this because the AFA topic will surely come up. If the statistic that I shared with you earlier is already a part of your world, it certainly will be soon. So make sure that you're having these kinds of dialogues to understand the nuances behind the thinking that goes into their value billing position. And then finally, what sorts of legal services are you currently using, and do you expect to make any changes? There's nothing wrong with asking this question. Find out what other firms they are outsourcing work to. Some of them will just tell you, okay, we're sending it to this firm and this firm and this firm, and we're sending this kind of work to this firm because we know that they do a good job with that. And, you know, that might be an opportunity if you say, gosh, you know, we haven't done a very good job of letting you know that we also have a really strong litigation group, or we also have been able to produce many successful results for our clients in the tax law area, and we'd be happy to introduce you to our partners, you know, just as a fallback position, because you may find that it's useful for you to have other options. In many cases, the clients just didn't know because your firm didn't do a great job of cross-selling and making those appropriate introductions within the partner base so that you could capture as many opportunities as possible from the client. So let's look at this second statistic. 53% of U.S. law firms are rarely in contact to see how satisfied the client is with the work. That statistic is also relevant outside of the U.S. So let's look to see what we can do about this. Now, client feedback programs come in many shapes and sizes. More and more law firms are adopting these, but I have to tell you, I still encounter a lot of law firms that really don't have any kind of formal, outsourced, or internal client feedback initiative. It's very informal. It's either reactive. They're going to let us know if they're not happy. By then, it's way too late. So you want to get in front of the problem if there is one. And many times, client feedback is avoided because the lawyers are concerned that, well, you know, I don't want to kick the hornet's nest, or I want to let sleeping dogs lie, or whatever the adage is that you prefer on this. But, you know, I'm afraid if I sit down with my client and I say, is there anything that we can be doing to satisfy your needs better, that they're going to say, well, you know, it's funny you should mention it. As it turns out, we have a laundry list of things that we're not very happy with. Now you have to deal with all of them, and let's start with your fees. And I think that this fear on behalf of the law firm keeps them from having an open dialogue with the client. But consider that if these concerns are there, and chances are they aren't, in most cases, 98% of the cases where you do any sort of client feedback, you're mostly getting positive reinforcement, positive feedback, maybe a nuance here or there that they'd like to see you change. But consider that if these are repeat clients, then you're right. They're happy with your services. The objective here is not to unearth some terrible skeleton in the closet. The objective is to make sure that you're doing everything you can to address this statistic, where the client feels that law firms are rarely in contact to see how satisfied they are. In some cases, they just want to express how satisfied they are. In some cases, they are satisfied with the work and they're not necessarily thinking of taking it anywhere else anytime soon, but there is that one associate that you put on, some of their M&A matters who they don't get along very well with that associate, or the associate seems a little green and, they're getting billed out a little higher than the client thinks that they should be. And, it's a small issue, so they haven't brought it up, but if you just let it sit there, it could become a vulnerable point that a competitor could play off of when they pitch your client. So again, put some sort of outsourced client feedback program in place, or you can conduct feedback interviews yourself. Generally, you want to do this through a firm leader or a marketer at your firm. Many lawyers are not particularly good at sitting down with their client and having that conversation. It can be a little bit awkward. If the client does have any negative feedback, it's sometimes tricky to navigate that. So if this is conducted by a firm leader who is able to not be defensive at all and really just say, hey, I'm just here to listen. I want to hear how things are going. I've prepared some questions. I really appreciate your time. How are we doing? What could we be doing better? Where else are you sending the work? Are there any questions that you have about our firm? And then whatever the client says, the interviewer is just going to want to take that information in. Don't defend against it. Don't, argue with the client about whether or not that thing that they're upset about actually happened in the way that they said that it happened. That's not what this is. This is simply an opportunity to gather information, take it back to the firm, and then respond to it and address whatever concern they may have or whatever concern you feel may be brewing. Satisfaction surveys are also obviously one way to do this. If you prefer to just send out an email and have them click a few bubbles, then you can do that. Obviously, you don't pick up as many nuances as you do with a face-to-face interview, but it is certainly better than doing nothing. You also will find that many of your clients won't bother to fill out an online satisfaction survey, but they may take a phone call, and they certainly are willing to sit down with you if you are going to be in the area. Many of you have seen this question when it comes to the products and services that you buy as a consumer. It comes from Fred Reichheld's book, The Ultimate Question, which came out about, I want to say, 10+ years ago. A really great book if you haven't read it, The Ultimate Question by Fred Reichheld. And what he talks about is that client satisfaction can really just be boiled down to this one question. He calls this the ultimate question, which is on a scale of 1 to 10, how likely would you be to refer my services to a friend or a colleague? And if your client says, okay, law firm, on a scale of 1 to 10, I would probably give that a 6, in terms of my willingness to refer you to, say, another GC in my network, or, somebody who I see has a legal matter. Would I necessarily refer your firm? I think on a scale of 1 to 10, I'd give that a 6. What Fred Reichheld says is that those people are actually detractors to your firm. In other words, they're hurting you more than they're helping you, because they are so critical of your firm. Now, they may continue to engage you, they may not, but they're certainly vulnerable to a pitch from another firm who tells them that that firm can provide whatever services it is that they feel are lacking at your firm, and whatever benefits and value adds they may be able to position as part of their pitch. But the client is also out there saying not so positive things about your firm to their network. And so you have somebody who is probably not all that happy with your services. You probably are having trouble collecting on invoices with them. Whenever they talk to another firm and the name, or another client or prospective client, and the name of your firm comes up, they sort of roll their eyes and they say, yeah, they're okay, but I wouldn't refer them, or I wouldn't recommend them. Those are the kinds of clients that, to the extent possible, certainly you want to address their concerns, get that number higher, or potentially even cull them if they're rating you particularly low on this scale of 1 to 10. They're definitely doing you more harm than good. These are those, pain clients that a lot of us just sort of hold on to because they're the bread and butter and they provide some revenue. But if we had our druthers, we'd never work with them again. They take up a lot of our time. They quibble on fees. You know, nobody really wants these clients, and so I would say that that could be a poor fit for your firm, and that they should be doing yourself a favor by passing them along to your competitors. What you want are clients who are going to rate you higher on this scale of 1 to 10. 7s and 8s are considered passive. That is to say, they'll pay your rates, but they probably won't refer. They didn't give a very enthusiastic response to this question. And promoters are 9s and 10s. These are the people who will refer you to others. They are delighted to be working with you. They're very happy with your services. And obviously what you want to do is, if you use a satisfaction survey, you can include this question. Some firms only use this question because it keeps the survey nice and short. And then based on that rating, they know that they either need to have a conversation with the client about how they can improve, or they need to have a conversation with the client about how they can start getting some more referrals from them, given their high willingness to give those referrals. I put a link down in here bottom from the Wicker Park Group. It's one of the outsourced client feedback consulting firms that we've worked with. They're very good, and they have a number of resources and articles on that page that you may want to look into if you find this a compelling topic for your firm. And then finally, the third statistic here, 60% of general counsel routinely ask law firms for alternatives to traditional hourly billing. So let's talk a little bit about AFAs and how to negotiate a pushback. You know, a lot of times what happens is the firm says, well, this is our stated rate, and the client just by default says, well, that's too high, we need a discount. And the client may not even have a specific discount in mind, and so the firm says, oh, okay, we'll give you a 10% discount. And the client would have settled for a 5% discount. So law firms are not necessarily very good at negotiating when it comes to fees. They want to be service-oriented. They want to please the client. They certainly want the business. They know that they can afford some shaving of the profit margin, and so they have a tendency to be a little unspecific when it comes to identifying a best alternative to a negotiated agreement, or frankly coming up with that negotiated agreement at all. This is ironic because lawyers are some of the best negotiators in the world when it comes to dealing with opposing counsel and dealing with the opposite side, but as a profession, there's still some work to be done in terms of their own business negotiations with their clients. So let's look at the BATNA. Basically, the idea here is that you want to decide on a monetary and temporal BATNA, or sort of a bottom line, if you will, before you enter the negotiations so that you can push back on unacceptable demands for a discount. This requires some preparation. It requires some forethought, a little bit of diligence, maybe a little bit of research. You want to make sure that you have thought this through before you sit down on the pitch meeting. And a lot of lawyers, they get really busy. They, are on the phone with one client as they're driving to meet with a prospective client, and then they pitch the prospective client, and the prospective client pushes back on fees. They haven't really put a lot of thought into what their BATNA might be, and so they immediately just sort of jump to a fallback position. Or they agree to something that's somewhere in the middle, but not necessarily as positive an outcome as they could have had. So you may want to consider discount thresholds, AFAs, and negotiated intangibles. We're going to go through all three of these in a moment. But this is how this is where you find yourself if, again, you're using a more, I'll say, traditional way of thinking, a traditional thought modality when it comes to negotiating. So you come to the table with a standard firm fee. The client says, no, you know what, we want a discount. We want you to discount that by, let's say, 30%. And you say, wow, 30%, that's a lot. Can we settle for, I don't know, 15% or something like that? And then you end up somewhere in the middle. But consider that what a BATNA does is it brings you to a better position that steps away from this binary of the fee or some fraction of the fee. So we're going to look at this in a little more detail. The first thing you want to consider when you're having any kind of an AFA conversation with the client is, again, what are their priorities? Remember we talked earlier about what are their business priorities from a corporate perspective, from an institutional perspective, not just pertaining to this legal matter, but also what are their client priorities when it comes to the fees that they're paying to your firm. Now, there are three components, three options here. It could either be cost, risk, or value. And you want to ask the client, which of these three are most important to you? Is it the cost of the legal services? Is it risk management that you're looking for? Or is it making sure that you have the best value for the money that you're paying? And of course, the client may say something like, well, all three. But what you're looking for is to encourage them to give you their priority of the three. So you would push back and just say, that's fine, we're definitely going to address all three. I just want to know which one is most important to you so we can start with that one. So let's say they say it's cost. They want cost certainty here. They want it to cost as little as possible, and they want to make sure that there are no unpredictable invoices that are coming to them halfway through the engagement that they didn't budget for. So a fixed fee arrangement is obviously going to be one AFA example that will be satisfactory to them. This is a set amount paid for the work, and the cost does not change irrespective of the amount of time the work takes or the resources used. A flat fee may also be part of the discussion here. This is where you handle a book of cases for an agreed negotiated total. Or perhaps a capped fee arrangement. And this is where the client would pay on an hourly basis, but you agree that the total bill will not exceed this capped amount. It's usually also accompanied, by the way, by a minimum fee. So this protects the firm, and you have essentially a cap on both ends of the extreme. Sometimes this is referred to a collared fee agreement. So these are the kinds of AFA models that are going to appeal to a client who is most interested in controlling costs, making sure that they stay exactly on budget. But they may be more interested in risk certainty, and this is where they want to make sure that they are not going to have a situation where they have to go back to their CFO and put themselves at risk, either from a legal perspective or a financial one. So perhaps a retainer would make more sense here, where they know that there's a set amount they're going to have to pay every month for a determined period of time. They don't have to think about it again. It's set in stone. Or perhaps a blended fee arrangement. This is where the client pays the firm a specified hourly rate, regardless of the lawyer who is working on the matter. So if it's, your associate, they're being billed out at $500 an hour. If it's your senior partner, it's being billed out at $500 an hour. The client knows that they will always see the same number on the invoice, and so that's going to give them some risk certainty. This wasn't suddenly a scenario where, oh, a bunch of senior partners had to get together on this thing and our invoice for the month quadrupled. Obviously, this creates some opportunities from the firm as well to push the work down and leverage this AFA for as much profit as possible, but while still meeting the client's expectations and satisfying their risk aversion. And then perhaps they're just looking for value. It's not a matter of, we're willing to spend the money here, okay? We've got the budget, we're willing to spend the money. We want the favorable result, obviously, for that money, but we want as much value as possible. I want to be able to go back to my CFO and say, look at all of this money that I was able to recover or save the company because I came up with a creative arrangement with the firm. So this might be a contingency arrangement where the fee is a percentage of the recovery. There could be a holdback where the company agrees to pay the firm a specified percentage of the firm's standard hourly rate, but then at the end of the matter, the firm is entitled to receive some sort of holdback bonus. And then, of course, there's a success fee or a bonus fee where the firm receives an extra payment that depends on the case resolution and whatever result you're able to generate. And obviously, all of that is predetermined in the negotiation phase with the client. So I put all of these before you simply so that we can underscore the notion that not all AFAs are created equally. And there may be some that are you're sort of your go-tos, and you find that you keep falling back on them because they're easy to explain or the clients have already gotten used to using them with you. But in fact, there may be other AFAs to start to bring into the conversation that might be more of a win-win. You can create AFAs, by the way, that are not necessarily on this list. An AFA is really just a mix-match of 5 different elements: the fee, in other words, how much you get paid; the timing, when you get paid. So they could, for instance, prepay for a set amount of work in exchange for a lower rate, and that gives you some risk management. You know that you're going to get a certain amount of revenue into the firm for the next 6 months, for the next year, whatever it is, and you've covered your nut, and now this client is sort of a stable as part of your revenue model. Attention, who does the work? Is this going to be a more senior person on the matter, more junior person? Risk, in other words, results influence the payment or volume of work, how long you get paid for. And again, if you understand your client's priorities, you can put an AFA in place that puts the appropriate element of these 5 that are listed here at the forefront. The other thing that we notice lawyers don't do much of, and I think it's a lost opportunity, is to barter intangibles. So intangibles are items that don't cost the client anything at all, but could be of serious value to the firm. So for instance, the firm could say, okay, well, you want this discount, we're willing to give it to you. We want to make you happy, we want to accommodate your need, but in exchange, we'd like to request some introductions to some of the key colleagues in your LinkedIn network. Would you be all right with that? I mean, I know from our client feedback survey that you mentioned on a scale of 1 to 10, you were highly likely to refer us to a colleague. Let's go ahead and begin that process and request some introductions from you. Again, it doesn't cost the client anything to do this. And rather than you sitting around praying that they pick up the phone and tell their friends about you, you can initiate that process as part of your AFA with them. You could co-host a dinner for key contacts in their network. If they bring some contacts, you'll co-host it with them, or you'll host it for them. And again, this is a way of you penetrating some of the people in their network who can become new clients of yours. You could speak on a panel together at an upcoming ACC conference or industry event. This positions you quite nicely as not only being able to work on a project with them that helps them understand your expertise and develops a better relationship with them, but also it puts you in front of an audience that could be very beneficial to your practice. You could ask for a testimonial for the excellent work that you've done, use it in your marketing materials, assuming that you're ethically allowed to do that, or on your LinkedIn page, and you could ask to be a guest at their next board meeting to meet some of the board members who are helping to make the decisions for the company. Not only does this tie back to the earlier slides on allowing you some insight into the strategic objectives of the company and to some of the choices and decisions that are being made that will influence the legal matters that the company will have down the road, but it also helps you network with their board, and that's usually a pretty influential group of people to be affiliated with. Finally, you could request to speak at a CEO forum, perhaps the Vistage or YPO or executive roundtable that any of the C-suite at the company belong to. These are all the kinds of things that, again, require a new kind of thinking. Most lawyers don't even consider it, but they are absolutely okay to ask for. And in fact, if the client has beat you up a little bit on your fees, it's a good idea to communicate to the client that, look, we want to come up with a win-win here, but we're not just going to buckle because you've pushed back on a rate that you've decided is too high and because some other firm down the road is giving you a lower rate. We've got to have a more sophisticated conversation about rates here, and we've got to have a more sophisticated relationship as someone who is invested in your business and is a partner to your business, as a trusted advisor to your business. So, let's make sure that this is a two-way street. One client negotiation tactic that you should be aware of that we hear happening, especially among larger institutional clients, is that clients will sometimes send out RFPs just so that they can get some pricing leverage against the firm that they're currently sending their work to. They're essentially trying to create this race to the bottom, right? How low can we see how low can we get the law firms to compete against each other on pricing before we come back to the firm that we were using anyway, but obviously now they've just reduced their rate for the same work that they were providing earlier. So just be cognizant that sometimes the requested discount is not set in stone. The CFO's mandate was something like, well, see if you can get the firm to lower its fees as much as possible. So they use the RFP process as a way of doing that, but changing counsel is not something that's high on their list of priorities. It is a challenging endeavor for them to change outside counsel, so they're usually reluctant to do it unless they really aren't happy with some element of the services or the fee structure. So just, you can have a more candid conversation with them about what it is that they're trying to accomplish here when you see an RFP kind of a scenario. And then the last point I just want to make before we wrap up here is, as you're negotiating with clients, remember the rule of 11. 11 comes after 10. We all learned this in the first grade. But sometimes lawyers forget this kind of math when they're doing discounts. They'll say, well, I'll give you a 5% discount. They're like, no, that's not enough. Okay, how about a 10% discount? Or maybe a 15% discount? All these significant jumps up the line. You want to signal your discount threshold by slowing your advance toward the compromise. So if you say 5%, they say, no, I want 20, and you feel like, okay, you've got to go up to 10. They say, no, I want 20. All right, I'm willing to go to 12 or 12.5. But you start to slow your advance, and now they see, oh, we're running out of slack here on how much leeway we're going to get. I don't think we're going to get 20. We better drop down and meet them closer to this 12.5 number, because I don't think they're going to hit 13 at the rate that they're going. All right, so anyway, here are the takeaways. I know we're almost out of time, so I'll just go through these very quickly. It's critical to understand your client's business needs and priorities, especially in today's marketplace. Gain a better understanding of the business by asking the questions that inform you as a trusted advisor of their needs. Pricing is a key factor, so approach fee negotiation with a win-win mindset. That means you win too. And based on in-house counsel surveys, there's still significant competitive advantage available to you if you are asking for insights into their business needs, asking for feedback, and negotiating win-win AFAs. These are the three priorities that they're looking for. You'll find that client visits and face-to-face interaction are usually the best forum for these kinds of conversations. And that takes us to the end. Lindsay, I hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, David. That was really great. While we're waiting to see if anybody has any questions, I will just finish with some housekeeping notes. We'll be circulating the recording tomorrow along with the slides again and David's contact information. For anybody that's interested, David did mention the Wicker Park group, and I've worked with them a little bit before, and I know several of our members have worked with them before, so they do come highly recommended if that's something you're interested in terms of client surveys. They do a great job. David will also be attending our Regional Conference of the Americas in November to facilitate a referral rendezvous session during the Saturday morning. So registration materials for that conference are actually out and available, so please register as soon as possible for this conference. You do not have to be from the Americas region to attend. We invite all of our members to attend, so if you're interested and you haven't seen the materials, please let me know, and I'm happy to send those directly to you. So we look forward to seeing all of you soon, and give our thanks to David for an excellent 2016 series of webinars. If you've missed any of the sessions and you'd like to see them, they're all available on our YouTube channel, which you can find by searching YouTube for ILN Today. So that is no questions I'm seeing at the moment. I'm sure that's a lot of information for everybody to think about and digest. If you do have any questions, please feel free to email those to me or David directly, and we'll follow up again on this soon. So thanks so much, David.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone.